She meets a man who for some reason looks at her differently than the world ever has, not with casual politeness or obligatory friendliness, but with a kind of focus that makes her feel suddenly important, as if something about her is worth paying attention to. His words are simple, yet they land deeper than she expects. A compliment from him doesn't sound like flattery. It sounds like truth, and that truth begins softening old wounds she never knew were still open. When he listens, she feels heard. When he notices her, she feels visible, and the insecurities she's battled for years seem to fade quietly into the background, as though they've been waiting for someone to tell them they no longer matter. His presence acts like reassurance, his interest like validation, and slowly the feeling of being appreciated becomes something she looks forward to, something she begins to depend on. It feels effortless, natural, like a gift she didn't know she deserved. And because it comes so easily, she doesn't question it, she doesn't analyze his intentions, she just absorbs it, allowing that attention to become a soothing remedy she never realized she was craving, something that makes her feel complete, safe, and worthy in a way she hasn't felt before she starts expecting his messages, waiting for his calls. Checking her phone repeatedly as if every vibration carries meaning, and every notification holds emotional proof that she matters to him. A day that once moved normally now pauses between texts, her focus drifting toward the screen as though it has become a mirror reflecting her worth. When he replies quickly, she feels chosen, energized, almost high on the sudden rush of connection. But when hours pass with silence, she begins questioning herself, wondering if she said something wrong, if he's losing interest, or if she simply imagined the bond he made her feel. Her mood rises and falls with his attention, happiness becoming something she no longer generates from within, but something triggered by his presence, his words, his responses. Each message becomes a reward, each conversation a hit of emotional excitement that she mistakes for deep affection. She confuses dopamine with love, believing the thrill of being wanted is the same as being valued, not realizing that her nervous anticipation comes from a chemical chase rather than true emotional security. The excitement feels intense, addictive, and meaningful, persuading her to trust the highs without noticing the growing dependence forming beneath them, pulling her deeper into a cycle where her peace is no longer hers, but something she waits for him to provide. He acts like her emotional savior, comforting her at the exact moments she feels weak, protecting her when she doubts herself, showing up with words that feel like medicine. "I'm always here. You can trust me. I've got you." His timing feels magical, as if he understands her better than anyone ever has. When she breaks down, he reassures her. When she feels lost, he guides her. When she feels insecure, he praises her worth. His voice becomes a source of calm, his presence a place of safety. She begins depending on him for emotional stability without fully realizing how subtly it's happening, as though each moment of comfort is weaving a quiet bond that makes him feel necessary to her sense of peace. She starts believing she needs him to feel okay, that her emotions make more sense when seen through his approval, that pain feels smaller when he acknowledges it. Gradually, she stops trusting her own strength and starts seeking his validation before making decisions or calming her fears. She doesn't notice that she's handing over her emotional power, not because he demands it, but because she feels safer with him holding it than trying to manage it herself. She mistakes dependency for love, thinking closeness is connection, unaware that her emotional control is slowly slipping out of her hands and becoming something she unconsciously entrusts to him, believing he is the one who keeps her balanced, grounded, and secure. He becomes inconsistent. The same man who once seemed endlessly available now appears and disappears like shifting weather. Some days he is deeply loving, affectionate, and attentive, flooding her with warm words, long conversations, and intense connection. On those days, she feels chosen, appreciated, almost special in a way she never expected. But then, without warning, he becomes distant and cold. His replies slow down. His tone changes. His presence fades into silence. She begins to question everything, wondering whether she did something wrong, whether she said too much, whether she is starting to lose him. The sudden contrast creates confusion, but instead of pulling away, it draws her in deeper. She remembers the version of him that made her feel seen, valued, and safe, and now she wants that version back. The inconsistency increases her attachment because her mind starts treating his attention like a prize, something she must earn again. She works harder to please him, becoming more agreeable, more patient, more forgiving, hoping that if she plays the right role, the loving version will return. She tells herself it's temporary, that he's just stressed or busy, that he still cares but doesn't know how to show it. Yet every small return of affection feels like a victory, every cold moment feels like a test, and her entire emotional balance starts depending on his unpredictable behavior, creating a cycle she doesn't recognize as addiction, only thinking she's fighting for love. She stops focusing on her hobbies, her goals, and even the friendships that once brought her joy. What used to excite her now feels dull compared to the rush she gets from him. Slowly, without realizing it, her world begins to shrink, narrowing around his presence like a spotlight that blinds her from everything else. She spends less time investing in her own growth and more time thinking about how to keep him close, how to make him happy, how to avoid anything that might drive him away. Her accomplishments no longer feel fulfilling without his acknowledgement. Even the things she used to take pride in start to feel insignificant unless he notices, praises, or validates them. His approval becomes her identity. When he is affectionate, she feels worthy. When he is distant, she feels inadequate. Every emotional shift from him dictates how she sees herself, how she values her time, and how she interprets her importance. It becomes easier to cancel plans, ignore personal opportunities, and neglect self-care because nothing seems as meaningful as being available for him. His presence becomes her purpose. The relationship stops being something she enjoys and instead turns into something she depends on. She is no longer loving him from strength, but clinging from fear, shaping her life around someone who now controls her sense of value without even asking for it, simply by existing at the center of her emotional universe. Even when he hurts her, she finds a way to defend him, protecting the very person who is silently damaging her. She rewrites his behavior in her mind so that it feels less painful, telling herself things that make the pain feel noble or meaningful. When he is distant, she whispers, he just needs time. When he dismisses her feelings, she thinks, he's just stressed. When he fails to show care, she convinces herself, he loves me but doesn't show it. These explanations become comforting lies she repeats to avoid facing the truth that would require her to set boundaries or walk away. Her loyalty starts to look like patience, but it is really avoidance. She holds on to the good moments like souvenirs, using them as proof that the bad days don't define him, even though the bad days are slowly defining her. She begins to equate love with sacrifice, pain with devotion, and inconsistency with depth. The human brain is wired to seek meaning in suffering, to look for reward after pain, the same way a gambler keeps playing after losing because they believe the win is coming soon. Her heart adapts to the emotional roller coaster, mistaking the intensity of highs and lows for passion. The more pain she endures, the more she believes the relationship must matter, because why would anyone tolerate this much if it wasn't real? She interprets suffering as proof of emotional depth, not realizing that it is trauma bonding, not love, that keeps her attached. Pain becomes normalized like a familiar language, and the brain begins to translate suffering into a twisted form of commitment. She finally reaches a moment where the noise inside her becomes too loud to ignore. It isn't triggered by a fight, a breakup, or even something dramatic. It happens in the quiet, in the stillness when she looks at herself and notices she no longer recognizes the person staring back. Her reflection feels distant, like a faded memory, a version of herself she once knew but somehow abandoned. She realizes her laughter has changed, her confidence has dimmed, her passions are no longer hers. The girl who once had dreams, boundaries, and a voice has been replaced by someone who waits for approval, someone who measures her worth through a man's attention. In that moment, something inside her clicks, not out of anger but out of awareness. She finally sees the truth that she had mistaken emotional dependence for love, intensity for connection, inconsistency for depth. What she thought was devotion was really addiction to a feeling that rose and collapsed with his behavior. An addiction only breaks when the person chooses to rebuild themselves, not by fixing the relationship but by restoring who they are. She understands now that freedom doesn't come from changing him, convincing him, or waiting for him to become better. It comes from returning to herself, piece by piece, rediscovering what she abandoned, and choosing her own emotional safety over the chaos she learned to call love.